What's up, everyone? It's your boy Financial Charles back at it again with another video. In this video, I wanted to talk about why I believe Bitcoin is a better investment than real estate. It's going to be kind of similar to my last video talking about why Bitcoin was better than the S&P 500. And I think this point of view is not a point of view that you will be hearing a lot in the real world at all. But the data suggests that Bitcoin is a better investment than both real estate and the S&P 500. And the reason that's so interesting, because in the real world, I really feel like there are so many real estate maxis out there. Like, they just think real estate's the best investment in the world. It's the only investment. I've heard the argument for the past decade. Oh, most millionaires are made from real estate. Real estate's this, real estate that, safest investment, blah, 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 intrinsic value, blah, blah, blah. And it's just funny. Like, I don't really run into a lot of S&P 500 maxis, but for whatever reason, there are just so many real estate maxis out there. But the data would suggest that out of all three, Bitcoin, S&P 500, and real estate is the slowest growing one, and that's even when you take cash flow into consideration too. And in fact, if there were no cash flow to real estate would not even be able to compete. The only reason you can even mention real estate in the same breath as S&P 500 and Bitcoin is because the cash flow makes it seem like it's competing, you know. But in true reality, out of all three of the assets, real estate is the slowest one to appreciate. And not only that, but you get taxed the hardest on it. You get taxed on the cash flow if you rent it out, but not only that, when you simply hold the property, you are paying property tax the whole time. And if you stop paying your property tax, it is no longer your property. It will simply be seized. In that way, it's like you're just a forever renter. You're just forever renting from the government, and you never truly own your home. And then to move on to the property tax, you get taxed for holding the asset, but not only that, the amount of tax that you owe grows along with the value of the property. So even if your home value is going up or your property value is going up, so is your property tax. In a way, property tax is a fancy way of saying unrealized capital gains tax, because you are getting taxed on a property that you did not liquidate or anything. You're just holding it, and you're paying the tax to simply hold it. It's a scam. Such a scam. I had a coworker tell me that his home doubled in value in about 15 years, right? That's great that your property was able to double. However, S&P 500 throughout history has doubled every 10 years or so. And in fact, ever since 2020, S&P 500 has doubled. So S&P 500 has doubled within the past 5 years compared to 15 years. It's no competition. Even if it took 10 years for the S&P 500 to double, it's still no competition, because I don't pay property tax on S&P 500. You know what I mean? Cash flow this, cash flow that. Even if you take the cash flow into consideration, the total amount of return is still not going to beat the S&P 500. And not only that, if you are earning cash flow on your property, that is work. That is required work. You have to contact contractors whenever something breaks, whenever something needs to be repaired. You have to, in a way, kind of keep an eye on your tenant. Obviously, not all the time, but this is a job. When you rent out properties, it's a job. When you buy a rental property to rent it out, you bought yourself a job. When you buy S&P 500, you're not buying yourself a job. You know what I mean? And the reason I'm comparing real estate and S&P 500 right now is because we already know from the last video why Bitcoin is already so much better than the S&P. If the S&P is better than real estate, that must mean that Bitcoin is so much better than real estate. The only reason, or actually not, I guess it's not the only reason, you know, real estate has value because of its utility of, you know, you're able to live in it and all that. However, if you think about the amount of leverage that is in the real estate market, like, that's kind of what makes it valuable in the first place. The fact that you can put 20% down to control you could put down $200,000 to control or to be exposed to a $1 million property, you know, and the upside potential of that $1 million property. But even then, even with that 5x leverage, the return, I would argue that you'd be so much better buying Bitcoin. Going back to the S&P 500, You don't have to pay any property tax. You don't have to manage any tenants. You don't have to manage anything in the S&P 500. You don't even have to balance out your portfolio or anything. The S&P 500 is simply an index of the top 500 companies, and it's weighed accordingly. Bitcoin is 0% work. Once you understand and build the conviction as to why you should buy and hold Bitcoin continuously forever, there's no work to be done. You're passively investing in it. You don't have to fix your Bitcoin sink. You don't have to fix your Bitcoin roof. You don't have to fix your Bitcoin HVAC. You don't have to worry about your Bitcoin tenant not paying you. And that's another thing. If your tenant does not pay you, what are you going to do? You cannot kick them out immediately. There's laws to prevent you from doing that. So you're just out of cash flow. You're talking about how real estate's so good for the cash flow, but here you are, your tenant is not paying you. Where's your cash flow? You know, you're going to have to go through a lengthy process to evict that patient, and it's not an easy process. And if 2020 happens again and the government tells you that you are not allowed to collect cash flow, you know, what are you going to do? Now you're just sitting on a slow turtle asset. You're sitting on an analog asset that cannot even compare. You know what I mean? So real estate is really something that you should only buy for the utility of living in it. I think everyone, assuming you have an abundance of money, you have to live somewhere, and I do think that perhaps buying a property to live in is going to be superior over perhaps renting, but maybe I'm wrong on that too. Maybe the renter that invests the difference in a Bitcoin is better off than the person that has his home and then he has so much value locked up in home equity. Maybe the renter will beat out the homeowner, assuming the renter invests the difference in Bitcoin. But hold on, sorry, I got raindrops on the windshield. What was I talking about? I completely forgot what I was talking about, but basically there's so many reasons why Bitcoin is better than real estate. Oh, that's what I was talking about. Like, the only time you should be buying a house is if you're going to use it for the utility of living in it, so you can have some coordinates to stay at, you know? If you're going to buy real estate for the purpose of investment, you are making an inefficient investment, because you put your money on the slowest turtle. You put your money on the slowest horse in the race. S&P 500 investors are outpacing you. Bitcoin investors are outpacing both of you, you know? So I understand why a lot of people think they grew up in the world and it's such a traditional mindset that, oh, real estate is a good investment. It's because I think people are able to more easily visualize the business behind, all right, I buy the property and then someone pays me to live in it per month. I get that that's a simple concept to grasp, and Bitcoin is a lot more complex of a concept to grasp for most people, but you know, you doubled your house value in 15 years. In the past 2 years, Bitcoin went from $20,000 to $100,000. That's a 5x. Will your house, if your house doubled in 15 years, will you even be alive for your house to 5x? And also over time, the more people that realize that Bitcoin is the #1 asset in the world forever, more value is going to bleed out of the real estate market and into the Bitcoin market. You know what I mean? And that's the same thing with the S&P 500. S&P 500 is always doing this, and then, you know, Bitcoin's always doing this, but over time, liquidity flows from stocks to Bitcoin. Same thing perhaps will happen with real estate. Liquidity in real estate will eventually flow into Bitcoin. And even if the boomers that own the houses don't believe it, the boomers will eventually die out and the assets will get passed on to the next generation. Eventually, all these assets will be passed down to Gen Z, eventually with time. And Gen Z typically believes that Bitcoin is the apex property of the universe. So, for example, if you were to give me a large amount of money, the very first thing I'm doing is finding out a way how I can buy as much Bitcoin as fast as possible. That's going to be the reality. And then the kids that are born today, the 0-year-olds, the 1-year-olds. They're growing up in a world in which there is an answer to what is the apex asset of the world. The answer is Bitcoin. They know to just put their money in Bitcoin. Gen Z will have kids and teach their kids how important Bitcoin is. And then we will just be raising generations and generations of humans that believe Bitcoin is the apex property. Everything bleeds against Bitcoin over time. Simple as that. That's my conclusion. Imagine if the Bitcoin markets were able to have the same type of leverage as these real estate properties. Imagine being able to take out a mortgage for Bitcoin. Instead of taking out a mortgage and for the house, you do the same thing, 30-year fixed, and then you lump sum everything into Bitcoin. The fiat value of the debt is going to just dissipate, while the stack that you hold 30 years later, once the 30-year fix is up, it's worth multiples and multiples and multiples. So if you want to continue being the snail in the race, continue involving yourself in analog assets. Continue buying the real estate, please. Continue. Because the more real estate that you are buying, the less Bitcoin that you are buying. And the less Bitcoin that you are buying, the more Bitcoin for me. Every single dollar that enters my hands gets put into Bitcoin, and it is no longer going to see the exchange forever because I don't intend on selling. All the Bitcoin that enters my hands will never enter exchanges ever again. Consider it lost. Consider it gone. Consider it out of circulation. There's only 21 million coins forever, and all the coins that I am accumulating, it's gone. It's gone. You will never, no one will ever see those Bitcoins ever again. And I'm a small shrimp. There are actual whales out there with multiple Bitcoins and tens and hundreds and thousands of Bitcoins. Imagine the Michael Saylors, and there's going to be more Michael Saylors that will be birthed throughout time. All these black holes, all these Bitcoin Maxis are black holes for the Bitcoin supply. Simple as that. All right, I'm going to end the video right here because the video is already 12 minutes long. But hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.